We have some time for Q&A. We started late, so I'll take part 7 minutes from the coffee break. But before that, I have a mission for the audience. Ambassador Wendy Sherman, who leads the American negotiations on the Iranian nuclear program, will speak to us through video conference at 4 p.m. And she is willing to take 2 questions. But because she is willing to take only 2 questions, we have to filter them. So everyone that wants to ask something, please write down the question and give it to one of the organizers, whether it's Emily, Tamar, raise your hand, and Azriel. Okay, I think that I'll do it from here. Okay, I saw Mark.
Thanks very much, Shlomo. Thanks for 3 very good presentations. I think the caliber of the presentations has really picked up since the last one yesterday.
You've been in England too long.
I'll just ask Alon, since North Korea is something I also focus on. The North Korea-Iran connections. Alon, you kind of mentioned almost as a matter of fact the nuclear cooperation between Iran and North Korea. I think it's probable. I think it's very logical, but I haven't seen any convincing evidence of it other than some unsourced media reports. So maybe you didn't have time to add the caveat that this isn't confirmed. But more importantly, you mentioned there's no trust of North Korea, and then your question, well, is there trust of Iran? I don't think that's really relevant. I think what's relevant is, as the point you made, are there incentives and disincentives for them both? And in the case of North Korea, what incentives can we give them that would match the nuclear program as what they see as the preserving the regime? And that's what we have. And then disincentives. The United States can't go in and flatten Pyongyang because of the repercussions for starting a Korean war. And that's so different from the Iran case. So in the East Asia case, America's most relevant ally, South Korea, does not want the United States to launch any military action against the North. In the Iran case, I would argue it's sort of the opposite. America's key ally has a different perspective about the need for military options. Yeah. So there are disincentives. And probably Iran also has incentives that matter more to them because they're more tied in with the world than is North Korea. If I'm supposed to ask a question, I guess my question is, don't you think I'm right?
Yes, you are. Yes, you
don't
can.
have to ask a question.
Okay.
With the next one?
You should start, I'm right, that's it.
Yeah.
Or liberal.
More questions? Please.
Yes, as a question for Bruno. There's a report recently by the Central European Policy Analysis think tank, which suggested that perhaps in the wake of the Ukraine crisis that nuclear weapons should be deployed from Germany to perhaps Central European countries as a means to deter Russia. What do you think of that suggestion? And how likely is it remotely likely?
Please, yeah.
Sido, the first point is you have mentioned that the concept of deterrence is not actually very salient. The concept of deterrence is not very salient in the Indian-Pakistani-Chinese triangle. However, at least as far as the Pakistanis are concerned, or Pakistani scholars or security studies experts, they keep referring to the notion of deterrence vis-à-vis India. So would you like to comment on that? And in addition, I take that the main thrust of your presentation is that in fact nuclear weapons have not contributed to strategic stability in South Asia, but actually the way around, that is that it is a source of a possible potential instability. Am I correct? And in that context, what is your comment on the paradox of the stability and instability paradox brought about by nuclear weapons? Thank you.
Okay, we'll do it in opposite order, so please, Sidhu. Oh.
will be the first one.
Oh, I was thinking I might have a little time to prepare. This is preemption, but that's fine, you know. Okay. Let me take the first question on Pakistan. And I think you're right. Perhaps of the three, Pakistan certainly articulates more, the language of classic deterrence. But its practice is very different. Its practice is very different in the sense that, in most of the cases, you had a fairly clear articulation of the use doctrine. In the case of Pakistan, it hasn't been there at all, number one. Number two, they also haven't gone in the classic way of, either launch on warning or launch on attack kind of structure. In fact, so it's a halfway house. They've done some from, the East-West context, but they haven't gone all the way. So they're very, very, very conscious of the fact, and also sort of, proud of the fact that there is, the weapons are de-alerted, they're non-deployed, and they're demated. So it's a halfway house. So in some ways, they've said, yes, we haven't actually weaponized all of this, but on the other hand, they haven't actually articulated the use doctrine and concept as well. So there's a little bit of a mixed bag there. That leads me on to your second question, and I think I would say yes. I think that would be the basic premise of my argument. And this is not to get into the debate that we've seen, Bruno, Patricia, and others talking about, which is kind of the role of nuclear weapons per se, whether they're stable or unstable, but simply to say that, and this seems to be the broad sense in Southern Asia, and here I would include China, that the mere presence of nuclear weapons is enough to ensure stability, and that's absolutely rubbish. Even in places where there were nuclear weapons, there was great effort, and despite that, tons and tons of risk to try and make sure that you didn't go to war. There have really been half-hearted efforts in Southern Asia, if at all. There's been more in India, Pakistan, almost none in India, China, and then this raises the question of how do you look at the triangle? So, to assume that these are such, miraculous weapons that their very presence will prevent any kind of conflict and absolutely you can ignore the possibility of nuclear war is living, in a fantasy world. And you've already seen that there have been increasing tensions. There's been a conventional conflict between India and Pakistan after they went nuclear. There's been, terrorist attacks which have almost led the two countries to conflict, which would undoubtedly have led down the nuclear path. Between India and China now there are tensions rising, and there is no mechanism at all to talk about, these issues. And these never come up at the bilateral level. They don't come up at the regional level. So that would be my kind of bottom line.
Thank you. Alon?
Okay. Yes, you're right. That's the end of my question. That's the end of my answer. Okay. Do we have a smoking gun that proves that North Korea and Iran cooperates? That was your question. First question. Or you hinted that the intelligence agencies manipulate the information that would serve the governments in Washington and Israel. I don't know. There isn't a smoking gun. We can see cooperation in the missile industry between Iran and North Korea. We can see the smoke from the.
Where's the smoke?
Someone's smoking. I don't know. It's the smoke. They don't show me. I saw once some kind of a classified document that hinted, but they don't show it. For example. Iranian participated in some nuclear test that the North Korean held. I would say it's more. The problem is if you would have a smoking gun that shows that North Korea is a backdoor program for Iran, and that means that all the attempts to prevent from Iran to have a nuclear bomb, they have it, and they didn't declare it. And this would be a problem. I haven't seen a classified document that says that there is a cooperation. Everyone talks about it. If you see one, I'd love to see it as well. Do we trust them? Well, speaking to some intelligence agencies, they said that they have it, but they weren't willing to show it.
Oh, nobody trusts them, of course not.
The agencies? They can't.
These North Koreans, the Iranians.
I thought, well, we don't trust the intelligence agencies as well. But trust, yeah. We don't trust them, but it doesn't matter. Because you don't do business, you don't play poker with the people you trust. The question is, what kind of mechanism can you have that you can control them? You mentioned the question is, do we have an incentive? The big question is, can you give incentive to a state that is willing to develop a bomb? I would say that North Korea, all the incentive that would have given her along the years wouldn't convince her not to develop the bomb, because it was in its main interest to develop a nuclear bomb to upgrade its status. You can read the Emily report. We can disagree on it, and we can have a conference on this issue. South Korea, the South Korean biggest fear, and even Japan's biggest fear, was that the American would have attacked a strategical attack against North Korea, and their biggest fear is North Korea would collapse because it doesn't serve their strategic and economic interest for the short term.
Yeah, first of all, if I may add my 2 cents on this. Imagine a square with 4 corners: Syria, Iran, Pakistan, North Korea. These 4 countries have had many kinds of strategic relations, and the conversations that North Korea and Iran have, when they've spent all day discussing ballistic missile retrofit or whatever, in the evening, do you think they speak about Persian cuisine? Maybe not. Unless, and I don't know, but I'm like Mark, I'm agnostic in a sense. Unless we hypothesize that the ballistic missile cooperation is so compartmentalized in both North Korea and Iran that the people discussing or cooperating on this have no information and no mandate to talk about other things. I'm just trying to see it from a logical perspective, as you are, I assume. And one thing about intelligence reports, sometimes intelligence reports quote newspaper articles, which then become a leak, and then the same newspaper say, "Oh, see, I was right, but you gave the information." That happens. I've seen it.
Sometimes the information was leaked to the newspaper.
No, absolutely.
The intelligence service, and it comes
absolutely.
back.
Now, to the question about nuclear weapons from Germany to Poland, I haven't seen or read or heard about that report you mentioned. I hope it's not a friend of mine who wrote it, because I'm going to be pretty nasty. It's lazy and informed thinking. First, the Poles are not interested. They want added guarantees, they want more reassurance, but they don't necessarily want, and I don't want, last time I checked, nuclear weapons. I think it could actually be counterproductive to visibly and publicly, emphasize visibly and publicly, discuss these kind of options. I'm not saying that there should not be a quiet discussion among NATO members about what to do with the nuclear arrangements in light of the Ukraine crisis. That debate should happen. But we have to be very careful about what's being publicly discussed. It can be counterproductive. However, that being said, 2 things. One, there may come a time in the coming months where NATO may have to say, well, the 97 Founding Act and the 3 no's were written in very different circumstances, and we may have to reconsider, and Russia should not necessarily assume that it will be valid for eternity. That's point 1. Later, in 10 years from now, if we are in the same kind of very tense situation with Russia, which I hope we don't, and Germany chooses not to prolong the life of its tornadoes, and there's another domestic debate about the nuclear presence in Germany, and then at that time one or several Eastern European countries actually believe they could benefit from US nuclear weapons on their territory, under the three conditions, then maybe something could have to be done. But certainly not now. And again, more than that, I think that discussing these kind of options publicly is not helpful at this point.
Yes, Mark.
I'm sorry, I made a huge mistake in my introductory joke. I thought I was the last speaker yesterday. I meant the last speaker.
Yeah, we
Okay. Nobody noticed. It's okay. Well, I saw that that will be the last question because I don't want to destroy your break. Yes.
Lucky me. Thank you very much. I'm from Romania. My name is Ariadna Pucin, but since we were on the topic...
Do you want nuclear weapons?
We sell at half price.
No, thank you. We don't want them, but there's a little technical, I hope only, issue. Romania is now in a very, very weird and very uncomfortable, I would say, geopolitical situation. And different Russian politicians have tried to push the limits of our decent, neutral position as much as possible through all kinds of means. And Romania hasn't really answered in a very very confident manner, I would say, or very straightforward. But that's because we don't really know where we are. A few facts: we joined NATO before the EU, and after we joined NATO, we accepted American bases, military bases on our territory, and with the possibility of the Americans bringing nuclear facilities without the formal agreement of the Romanian government.
No. No. No, there's no agreement to bring nuclear weapons in Romania. That's not true. Unless you have state secrets that I'm not privy to.
I can double check and I can send you the article.
Please do.
I will.
Okay.
So either way, recently there have been a lot of visits from American and European politicians, and they are all behind us. But that means we are at the front of a fight that we don't. I don't really know what kind of position would be ideal or Romania could approach in this case. So I was wondering if, in the general context of nuclear strategic interests, you could give some suggestions about this.
You know, I actually think it's up to Romania to say what it needs and how it wants to be reassured. What is interesting, unfortunately, is that by the standards of 2014, Romania is now a frontline state, in a sense, almost a frontline state. Moldova is a frontline state. And I think that it's up to the Romanians themselves to decide what they expect from NATO, from the US, and from Europe. It's not for external actors to say that. I think the best that external actors, parties to the Washington Treaty can say is that we are ready to meet our Article 5 and Article 4 commitments, but it's up to you, Romanians, to say what you expect from us in addition to that. So I'm not sure I'm in a position to make concrete suggestion without knowing more about what Romanians want from their European and NATO allies.
Okay, thank you. And now we are going to the coffee break, which will end at 11:50.
Thank you, Shlomo.
Thank you.
Pleasure.